Okay, hello everyone who is watching, and for those who are listening later on, either on YouTube or on one of our platforms through the podcast. Usually, when someone comes to my attention and they're talking about their services, I always go through those I know in the game that are selling products and who they've worked with and who they referred. Patrick is a man who has been mentioned once or twice, but by some people I really respect, and he's been dubbed as one of the best sourcing people you can find out there. Now, Patrick isn't like loud and out there in terms of himself, but there's people that really vouch for him. And I have recommended Patrick in the past to some people to work to help them out with sourcing, and they've come back with just glowing reviews. So Patrick is a man who knows what he's doing, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today, Patrick. So thank you for joining us. Um, and then we also have Ben with us. Ben's not new to the e-com space. He is my amazing advisor. He's always given me support and providing advice, and he's now joined the company part time just to kind of give us some strategic advice on a partner level. So I've got him in here with me to just ask questions that I might miss. Patrick, I want to kind of move this over to you. So, Patrick, it would be great if you could give those listening a bit of insight into your past, how you got to where you got to, how long you've been in this space too.
Sure. So first of all, can everybody hear me okay? I just want to make sure coming through okay. No problems. All right. Perfect. So yeah, my name is Patrick Maioho. I've been sourcing for a few decades now, or a couple of decades. I actually started out in sales, which is why I'm so interested in the e-commerce space too. But I was in sales, happened to make a trip overseas, came back, and that started my sourcing career. Long story short, over the last couple decades, worked for a few large companies, let's say corporations, I guess. Did a lot of work for those companies to source. Had a couple $100 million average spend per year. Even right now, I have employees in China and in Vietnam. I left the corporate world back in 2021, right after the COVID thing happened, and I've just been sourcing for other companies ever since. I also have my e-commerce businesses, so I got into Amazon about 2014, and I've been in that space ever since. So right now, I'm still heavily invested and heavily involved in overseas sourcing, as well as hedging now too. I mean, I've been resourcing even my own products and some of my own clients outside of China, even into the United States. So it's been very busy, especially in these times. It's been very, very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. And just with what you were saying about working with China and Vietnam, where you still have people on the ground there, you at one point were a co-owner of a trading company in China, weren't you?
Yeah, so I did have principal investment in a trading company in China, in the Shanghai area, Ningbo area actually, so just south of Shanghai, and operated that thing for 4 or 5 years. So I have a lot of experience with the ins and outs of importing, exporting out of China, mostly exporting out of China.
Yeah, I just think it's really interesting because you have both kind of perspectives, both the people coming into China to source, and then the Chinese companies that are trying to export out to other places, like you would have been doing through your trading company. So I think it's interesting seeing the two perspectives that you'll be able to share with us.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it was interesting. Learned a lot with that. So it gives me a unique perspective and having to be on both sides of the coin, because when you have something like that, as far as like a trading company that you're operating and managing, there are little things that you do that give you advantages, but there are also a lot of lessons to be learned as well when you're dealing with foreign governments and whatnot.
Yeah. So before we get into the way this is the tariffs are impacting people in the U.S. and around the world that are selling in the U.S. and trying to import into it, I realized I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but I'm curious. If you were still running that trading company, what would you be doing as a company working out of China to try to accommodate or work with U.S. sellers, or is that something you'd even be able to do?
That's a tough question. The first thing I do as a trading company is because as a trading company, obviously you have relationships with both your buyers and your sellers, right? With the vendors. Like, so I go to suppliers, and the first thing I would do is sit down and talk with them about, like, hey, these are what the tariff numbers look like. Let me show you from my side. So as a purchaser of your product, let's say your product costs me $1. I buy it from you FOB Shanghai for $1. When it gets to me right now, let's say it's 150% is what your tariff obligation now. That $1 cost now comes at $2.50 for me.
Right.
Because it's 150% tariff, right? So I want to sit down and at least walk through the numbers with them and see what can we do right now at this moment going forward before anything else leaves port. What can we do right now to negotiate offsetting that tariff obligation? And that's the first thing I would do on there. But then I would show them like the impact of what it is in the market, because a lot of the Chinese sellers, and this is back when I was both working for a corporation and as a seller at the same time in China. A lot of the misconception that many at the time Chinese sellers had is they saw something on Amazon, they saw what it cost to take, but they didn't understand like all the Amazon fees the seller pays, having the warehouse, all the logistics. So they see like this huge bubble and they're like, oh, it's so wide, like you guys are killing it. But you're not, because as a business owner, just like them, you have all these different costs. So that's the first thing I would do right now is go right to my sellers or go right to my vendors, and work with my customers on the US side and say, okay, where are you at? And then you start bridging those gaps and making sure that everybody understands what the level playing field is, because the one thing that can happen is people can lose their heads when something like this comes on, and it becomes an us versus them mentality. Now it's me versus my supplier, or it's US versus China. It's always this versus instead of, me and my supplier, or the US and China. You know what I mean? Like they put the versus instead of the and in there. And once you do that, can change your perspective. And if you stay calm, you legitimately then can find creative ways that are legal to, offset some of these additional costs.
Yeah. And is that something you'd recommend that we as sellers do now, is go to the manufacturers and kind of go through, these are what our costs are, this is what we're looking at, this is how this is going to impact our actual profitability?
Yeah, that's one of the first things I would do. I mean, honestly, the first thing I would do right now is I would look at all of your dates. So what I mean by that is anything that you've ordered, you want to know where it is. If you have stuff that's sitting in a factory right now, you want to know when those dates are, like when they're planning on shipping, and then see if they can hold it. And if you can pay a fee to hold, if you want to wait to see what happens. I would know like when stuff left the port, right? So like we were talking at one time earlier, Ben, that if your product left on April 3rd, and let's say this last round of tariffs wouldn't affect April 9th, you should not be impacted. You should be under, if you sailed, like if your stuff actually sailed on that date before that tariff went into effect, you should not have the additional tariff obligation. You should be under the old obligation, right? So like midnight on April 9th. So know your dates. What's your dates? What's your dates of sailing? Whatever, everything that's coming in, because you need to track that. Because if there's a clerical error, and that happens, you have your dates. You have everything on like ISF forms, export records, all that. Like have that in line. The second thing I would do is I would work with my freight forwarder. So if you have a freight forwarder that you have a relationship with, and you should, I've said it many times before for people, your freight forwarder should be like an integral part of your team. It should be like your best friend, because a good freight forwarder has a very knowledgeable customs broker that can help guide you through not only HS codes, but all these case liabilities and things that happen. And then you have all of that information, and then you start working with your supplier. You go to your supplier and you start saying, okay, what can we do to help offset some of this? And you have to approach it from a partnership standpoint, Don't say like, oh, it's going to kill my business. Don't say that. I wouldn't say that. I would say this is going to impact our business together. What can we do to keep this relationship thriving?
Yeah.
Or what can we do to stabilize our relationship right now long enough so we can figure out how to best move forward. Some of the mistakes I'm seeing right now when I see, some of the groups that we all belong to, and I'm not picking on anybody because this is a very tense situation. You have people's lives and businesses and money being affected, and we all you can get very emotional and stuff.
Absolutely.
Is that I would, go and start using these things together. Like, what can we do together to make this work?
Yeah. Yeah, it has to be a partnership between you and the supplier, you and the manufacturer that you're working with. If it's not, then the relationship is already not set up in a way that you're going to be successful long term from a sourcing perspective. Because the better your relationship is with the manufacturer you're working with, the better terms you can get later on, and everything else that people have been talking about for years. This is just a continuation of that. At least it sounds that way to me, where it's a continuation of that relationship where you need to have that in order to be truly successful.
You do. I mean, if you have a transactional relationship with your seller or with your vendor, your supplier, whatever you want to call them, trading company or whatever, if you have just a transactional relationship, it's going to be a lot more difficult to navigate through what's going on right now than it would be if you've had a partner that you've been working with, for years, that you've, visited and done business with and been creative together. I mean, I know I sound dry about it and callous maybe, but I mean, that's just bless you. That's just the reality of the situation. I mean, those that have those, kinds of relationships right now truly have the advantage over a financial transactional relationship.
Oh, absolutely. And as I know, one of the things that you've said to me repeatedly is just don't panic. People need to not panic and like watch and see how things are playing out and pay attention and like start looking at your possible avenues for other ways to source, other places to sell, other ways to store and manage inventory. And we're going to get into a lot of that. But the first thing I wanted to bring up is just the solutions that you're hearing regularly now are things like using DDP shipping, changing HS codes, bonded warehouses. Some people are talking about trying to legally transship, where they're sending inventory to, say, Vietnam to have the product then finish there or something like that, or trying to make it so that at least it's arguable that that they're not violating the transshipping laws. But so there are a lot of things that people are talking about doing. Are there any in there that stand out to you or that you would recommend we focus on?
Looking at HS codes, I do that anyway, because the harmonization tariff index, like the HTS, the U.S. government, let's say, if you're selling into the United States, right, you would use like the harmonized tariff schedule. You go to the U.S. government website, they publish like all of their stuff in full PDF format, right? So all those updates are made. Like, you're not always. You should regularly look at, are things changing for your products? Are HS codes or categories or things? Because it's not a static, right? But it's not evolving, whatever. So that's where like working with your freight forwarder and your customs broker. When you get into
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing. Is that my internet or is that yours?
I think it's Patrick's internet. I'm having trouble as well.
Oh man.
Okay. We can hear you again now, Patrick.
Okay. So if we take DDP, for example, DDP is a great way for terms to have stuff shipped in on a regular basis. When you change, anytime you do an abrupt change, you risk having CBP, which is Customs and Border Patrol, be alerted. So if you've been bringing in the same product for years, all of a sudden you go from FOB Shanghai to DDP, and now your prices are significantly less. All these things, I mean, it sends a red flag. And while depending on how you do your DDP, most of the time the seller will be, on they're liable for everything. So, which is fine, except if that product gets seized at the border because of it, you may not be liable for what the supplier did, but you're not going to get your product. And now you've put your supplier at risk for doing that, right? Mm-hmm. Anytime that you're on the, and if you're a seller and you're an importer, anytime that you are the importer of record, then you are responsible without any statute of limitations for that obligation of importing. So whether it's the HS code is wrong, like the CBP could come back to you and say, you actually put this in the wrong category, and they could say it 15 years from now. And so they can say, you did this 15 years ago, you shouldn't have. We are going to now we're going to bill you basically for that tariff obligation. Plus we're going to give you a penalty and interest for that, so those types of things you need to be really careful of. I mean, especially when you're the importer of record, that's it. It's all on you. So that's a risk. Transshipments, I'm weary of anyway. If you're doing a transshipment and let's say like, hey, I'm going to have all my components to make this Bluetooth speaker, and I'm going to send it to Vietnam to be assembled. Great. So you send those components. It's a semi-finished product or whatever. You have it assembled. There are rules and regulations about how much has to be completed or how much of the costs and everything go into it to be counted as made in Vietnam to be shipped out. Mm-hmm. But if you're the importer of record, you're still responsible for that chain of events by the time it shows up to the U.S. So there are things that you can do, but you really got to scrutinize. Like that's when I would be talking to my supplier. Like, hey, if you're going to do this, how does all this stuff break down? How does this material break down? What else can we get in Vietnam? Can we get these screws in Vietnam? Like, can we, like, whatever you can do to add then to that thing that you're bringing in to make it more Vietnamese, but right now, my fear is one of the reasons why Vietnam and Thailand and some other areas in Southeast Asia, especially, are on this list is because China has basically invested so much money into putting industry, manufacturing capabilities and stuff in these countries that they now want these countries to be obligated to crack down on just transshipments or crack down just on like all these Chinese goods coming in, being finished and then shipped away. So I think you'll see more guys like Vietnam come back to make negotiations. Time will, I think it's all going to happen that way. Because I just.
Oh, we lost you again.
Darn it. I apologize. My internet was fine.
We can hear you again now.
Yeah.
Okay. I would just be careful when it comes to transshipments. Somebody they sent product into.
I'm sorry. I think we're losing you again. Can you hear us? I think we have lost him for a second.
Yeah. I mean, while Patrick comes back, Ben, you were actually in China when all of this stuff was happening in terms of the kind of Trump and all these updates to what the tariffs are going to be. What's been your take on it? What have you seen? How was it on the ground?
Yeah, so I was there from the 2nd to 11th of April. Originally, it was actually kind of interesting. The manufacturers that we were meeting with were relatively positive about it on the first day or two after the tariffs were announced because they saw the tariffs for other parts of Asia, and they were looking at that as a positive because they thought that would make it them be able to compete a little bit better in certain areas where they couldn't compete previously because China was paying tariffs and the other Asian countries weren't. So they were actually excited about the possibilities initially. Then obviously the tariffs rising again after that twice, and then having the 90-day delay on the other countries and having it more focused on China led to that optimism going downhill a bit. But it was very interesting seeing the perspective, because it wasn't a why do we have all these tariffs? It was a there's a way that we can make this work. So the companies that we were meeting with, the manufacturers I met with when I was there, they were eager to still have things work out and find ways to do business together. So it was still a positive experience.
Great. I think we got you back.
Patrick, I think you're back.
Okay, I'm back. I apologize about that. Unforeseen. So
yeah, no worries at all. So you were just finishing up talking about transshipping, I think.
Whenever so I mean, my concern is that like when you transship and you do stuff like that, whenever you do something a little different abruptly, it does send a flag. And I know of plenty of stories of people who have just done the reboxing, tried into the US and had container seized. And not only do you container seized, but then you have fines and penalties. So, everything right now is a business decision, and you have to weigh on, what the risk is and how much you're obligated. I mean, I have no problem with anybody offering creative solutions. I have no problem with that. Some are, I think, a little bit more gray than others. But as a business, it's all about survival. But just realize what your obligation is when it comes to importing. As sellers, whenever we import something, as buyers, whenever we import something to resell, like on Amazon or e-commerce platform, we are obligated for that that imported good. And so that ends up coming back on all of us. And again, with no statute of limitations, you have to know those risks. And as long as you know those risks and you're willing to take them, then, so be it. I'm not going to, shoot down anybody's ideas. I just, I'm a little wary of, I don't like to use the word, but like what seem like hacks, like these quick fixes that you can do. They may work temporarily, but very rarely is it a long-term solution if they end up working at all.
So I do at some point want to talk a little bit more about the kind of the geopolitical situation, see how you see it moving. But before we get into that, you've sourced from tens of countries around the world. And I know from talking to you before, because I've known Patrick for about 3 years, and he's helped me with some projects. And one of the things that you told me is China is easier than anywhere else in the world to source from, because if you want to have jeans made and you find a denim manufacturer, they know where the button manufacturers are. They know where the zipper manufacturers are, and they can reach out to them, and they already have those connections to make a finished product for you. Versus if you're going into, say, Vietnam or Mexico or South Korea or India or one of those other countries, one of the big issues is you can find somebody who makes the core material for your product, but even just getting the packaging and everything organized can be a struggle, finding that manufacturer and then connecting them. So how would you go about this?
It's extremely more difficult. I think, that's been the advantage of China, like you said, and Alibaba proves that. You can just, you can find anything on there, right? I mean, it's just a barrier to entry is so low. And when it comes to daisy chaining, a lot of that is, and I've had to do it. This is why I kind of have some expertise in it. I've had to go into Vietnam, and when you're setting up like a retail good, a finished product, you have to go out and find all those accessories. You have to find the button guy, you have to find the zipper guy, you have to find, your thread manufacturer, your threaded guy, and all that, your cut and sewer, all those things. And you have to set up that daisy, that little supply chain, internal supply chain, to make those bill of materials work. And most of the time, guys are good at doing one thing, and expanding that ability requires a lot of hand holding. Now, I think today is much not much different. It's a little bit different where these countries understand that. Like Vietnam, like when I talk to my suppliers in Vietnam now, they're much more acutely aware that they have to have now other suppliers that they have to team up with to make a product. And it's all going to be in how good your development team is too. If you have a team that can help you develop your product and you have your specs and all that, it makes it much easier to go to like a little stamper and say, hey, I need this little metal piece stamped out, I need this money, or to go to a thread guy and say, hey, I need, this denim and I need this thread for stitching or whatever. I mean, it makes it a lot easier once you do that and you have that developed, but a lot of it takes work. It takes either having people on the ground there or you yourself going to travel to find these guys and to make those connections to make it work. And it takes more time. I mean, and right now, I mean, I hate to say it, and I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but, everybody's up against the clock, and time, when people want to move this fast, it doesn't happen that way 9 times out of 10. I'm not saying it's impossible. No, it's not impossible. Just saying it's improbable, because if you're looking to go to Vietnam now, if you're looking to go to India now, if you're looking to go to Thailand now, you are going to be in a line. There's a queue, because there were people that saw this coming already that were, kind of getting in there. And now there's going to be this huge influx of buyers that want products outside of China. And that's that will add to the cost too, right? Because again, if you go on a supply and demand side, there's going to be more demand than there is immediate supply. So potentially that could actually drive up costs in other countries. And I think some people are seeing that right now.
And that impacts, does the same kind of impact with U.S. manufacturing, where now people might try to make a snap adjustment to get to a U.S. manufacturer, and there are already queues building up for those. The minimum order quantities are going to be typically higher than in China and some of the other countries that we're talking about. So getting into U.S. manufacturing, I know that's something that you've done a good amount with as well. Like, is there, I mean, obviously there are no shortcuts, but is there still time to do that?
There is. It just depends how much time you have available to dedicate, or can you delegate that time to do it. I'm actually working on a couple of projects right now, and it takes up a lot of time to go out and find guys that have enough capacity to fit in what needs to be done. I'll give you this quick little example. I live in Michigan. Michigan is sort of like the automotive hub of the United States, or has been known as automotive and furniture for a long time. Like West Michigan's been furniture. Detroit on the east side of the state has all been automotive, right? So GM and Ford, whatnot, are headquartered in Detroit. And I heard last week from 2 different friends of mine who are in like the tooling industry that I've been trying to, get some work done with. They told me that both the auto manufacturers are putting a lot of pressure on their tier 2 and tier 3 vendors, in the Midwest region to start getting ready for large orders coming through. So guys that would have had capacity because Ford and GM weren't buying as much, now all of a sudden are not going to have capacity, because those guys are going to come in there and they're basically going to say, whatever it takes to get this done now. So that's the kind of things like you're kind of competing against, right? But are there plenty of like guys that are willing to do stuff here in the United States and that have capacity? Yes, but that's not going to last for long, because those queues will fill up. And a 200, like let's say a max of 245% tariff from China, our largest supplier, let's say for e-commerce, it makes the prices of U.S. now competitive. Realistically, that's just what it is.
Yeah. And I know one of the issues I had with a product that I was selling, I sold, I think, 100 packs, and they wanted me to, I wanted to do a run of 1 million of it that would then be put in 100 packs. And the U.S. manufacturers I was talking to wouldn't do below 5 million. So as far as like average order quantities, have you seen much flexibility, or because of what's happening with there being more people trying to get things sourced, are just taking the best kind of largest orders?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think of how I want to word this example. Right now, I am in the middle of a small project, or a larger project actually, of moving stuff, into the United States for 2 different companies. And when you start talking to these U.S. guys, a lot of it is they are getting so many calls right now that everybody now is like a voyeur, right? Like everybody's just kind of testing the waters. Everybody's making a call. Like they spend more time quoting and answering people's calls. So I think that there are creative ways to get around, let's say, like these minimums, for serious guys. But it's like, are you willing to put up money, like pre-deposit money, to show that you're serious to get this project developed? I mean, when I say be creative, I mean be really creative. Like you find out what it takes. If you're really serious, like you have to move. Like you get really creative because you go into survival mode. Are you willing to put a deposit down with a vendor in order to develop your project and get it going? I mean, as a line placeholder. I mean, you're not paying them to hold your place. You're making a deposit to show that you're committed, because right now there's a lot of looky-loos, right? There's people that are coming in and saying, hey, I want to move. But then they get scared off because like of the price, or like you said, like you have 5 million. I think my personal philosophy is everything's negotiable, even that 5 million. And it may not be, it may take a lot of work or whatever. Like, I would say, okay, 5 million. Could we make that 5 million over 2 years? If I keep the 5 million over 2 years, you mean like creative ways like that. That's kind of how you want to do it. If getting in front of the line is your most important priority.
And how would you said there are creative ways to do it. Like you have, and you mentioned the deposit. Are there other things that you'd suggest, like offering a contract for ordering a certain amount over a certain amount of time or something like that? Or like what other avenues would you consider?
Yeah, I mean, if you can do a blanket PO, I mean, that's, again, like I said, if you can do, like in your example, Ben, let's say 5 million, that's your minimum order. Okay. So I would say, can I buy that 5 million over 2 years? Like add a store, like a minimal storage fee or whatever. Like you find ways to work, and I'll meet your minimum order. Will you do that? Okay. Well, they're like, well, we're not really comfortable. Then you say, well, instead of doing 5 million over 2 years, what if I ordered 2 million this year at a higher price? Because a lot of that time with printers and stuff, it's setup costs. Like if you know how your stuff's manufactured, and that's the other thing too. If you know your product really well and you know how it's manufactured, it makes it easier to negotiate some of these nuances because you understand the language, or you understand like how things are done, and you can be creative. So I got a printing thing with yours. I would say, well, if the setup cost is this, what if I pay the initial setup costs and you only run this amount? Or I'll buy enough of the inventory, or I'll buy enough of like the raw materials ahead of time for you to hold to at least have my placeholder. I mean, there are different things that you can do to give yourself, advantage. If time is your biggest priority,
then you can buy
you're okay with, and you're okay with flexing the money. If you're gonna say pay an extra 5 points on it, and you can get terms and you can sell your stuff fast enough, it should work out. Theoretically.
That absolutely makes sense. And I think I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but going back to the manufacturing in China, we didn't really finish that conversation, I don't think. So we talked about what to do if you have things that are already on the water, as far as checking the dates and making sure that you're prepared and know what tariff burden you will potentially have on those. For inventory that's being made in China from orders that you've maybe put down a deposit on, or you have a contract for, or something like that, what kind of avenues do you have to not end up having to pay what could be a backbreaking tariff on some of those? I know we talked about the shipment of things. We didn't really touch on bonded warehouses yet, and I wanted to get back to that. But I know you and I have talked about how this might be a reason why people should potentially really push for getting into Amazon, UK, EU, Japan, like looking at the different marketplaces as well, where they can potentially pivot where the inventory is being shipped to? Did you hear me all right, Patrick?
Yeah, so the bonded warehouse is what you were asking. Sorry,
bonded warehouse, and then getting it other marketplaces. Yeah,
sure. So first of all, I apologize. Apparently, StreamYard doesn't like me very much because it keeps like circling. So because my internet says I have 300 megabyte download right now. So for bonded warehouse, that's fine. Again, it's all on. It all ends up in the United States. You know, I don't understand the nuances of how to play a game with bonded warehouses to speak intelligently enough. But all I know is like if it's going to enter the United States, whether it goes through a different country or a bonded warehouse or whatever, it's where was it made and what's the obligation? You know.
But I think with the bonded warehouses, people are saying to store it there until
to hold it. That's fine.
Go away.
Oh, okay. Because sometimes, like, you have the bonded warehouse, like, oh, you can send it to Canada, and you do it in this little like tariff-free zone, and then kind of. So bonded warehouses, that's all going to be on how long you want to hold it.
Yeah.
I mean, eventually you want to. Now, I'll tell you this. This is where bonded warehouse I think is your best advantage. If I think the tariff is going to stay around for a little. I don't. It's like a 60, 90-day thing out of China right now. That's just my personal opinion. I have nothing to support it. If I had a significant amount of inventory that was going to be finished in China, my relationship means a lot to me with my Chinese supplier. I would have it in a warehouse, or I would talk to my supplier about holding it a little bit longer. I would do everything I can to get myself up and running in the European market or in the Japanese market or one of the other places, Amazon or whatever, and get that shipped to a spot that has a lower tariff rate where I can sell it faster. That's one thing. A bonded warehouse would be good because bonded warehouse is going to buy you time. Will buy you time to make. So while you're staying calm, you're not panicking, and you're not losing your mind. A bonded warehouse or even having your supplier hold it for a period of time for you to be able to pivot is a really, really, really smart move.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And I know you touched on it a little bit as far as like the 60, 90 days. Like how do you see the next 90 days playing out before the decision is made on the tariffs on other countries or before that's kind of brought back up again?
So let me preface it by this. I don't know everything. I am not a tariff expert. I'm not a political expert. I'm just, like everybody, like everybody else right now. I watch like CNBC. I'll watch Fox News. I'll watch, BBC's. I'm watching all the reports coming out of it.
I'm just curious what your opinion is. We're not going to hold you to this. George,
history's okay. Right now, when it comes to, let's say, where we are with China, history proves to us right now, recent history proves to us right now that the tariffs are not temporary. I think there was a big push when all the 301 and stuff came out in 2017 and 18 and whatnot. There's talk that those were going to get like pulled back or overturned, and they never were. So right now, there's nothing that tells me that the tariffs in China will go away. Could they be lowered, or could some other things happen? Yes. But right now I am operating under the assumption, which I don't like, but I'm operating as if the tariffs are going to be here for at least the rest of this year. So when I look like right now, like everybody should be having all their Q4 stuff being produced, so it ships out to get here and prep for Q4. This stuff will not go. I don't think this stuff is going to go away before Q4. I know people are hoping that it does. Like, by the summer when things ship and land, it won't be. I do believe that things will be here through Q4 of these tariffs. Now, other countries. This is what I am the most interested in. Is countries like Vietnam, Thailand, only because of like what I have going on there. Yeah. I think that, and the speculation is, and I agree with it. I think like for Vietnam example, the 46% tariff will go down I think they'll probably cut that in half when they go to enact it in less than 90 days now.
Mhm.
If a deal is done where Vietnam really does go to zero tariff for everything, and they're the first ones to kind of like bridge that gap, other than Israel, the first ones of the Southeast Asian countries to bridge that gap and say that, I think you'll see a huge reduction, if not almost a free trade agreement, come between those. That's just my feeling based on what I'm seeing right now.
Okay.
So I think the other countries, there's more of an avenue to negotiate and lower their tariff obligation. But a lot of it is going to be predicated, like what I had said earlier, about making, this administration, in my opinion, wants to make sure that these other countries aren't being used as transit stops, for Chinese goods, whether through just their factories that they have there, or just with, like, let's say reboxing, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Cool.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to a little bit, Patrick, to what you said earlier, because there's going to be those who, obviously, most people are going to want a solution for now. How can they kind of make sure that they get the best rates, to make sure whatever they pay at the end, they still got some margin left, or a substantial amount of margin. But for those that are thinking more long term, they might have just invested everything into China and are getting all their manufacturing done in China. What would be the steps you would recommend people should take as the first steps to start considering other countries? What would be other countries that would be good for their products? Who should they be speaking to?
That's a very, very good question, and very complex, right? Because there's a lot of different ways to look at it. But as a hypothetical, if I had an obligation in China now, what I would do if I want to explore other countries, if you have access to, like, the Customs and Border Patrol database, it's like through Panjiva or something like that, I'd go back and research. I'd backtrack research products that come from other countries, right? So if I want to look at Vietnam, and let's say I'm in textile, so say I sell like apparel. If I sell apparel, I'm gonna look at Vietnam, I'll look at Cambodia, I'll look at these countries, and I'll see, like, I'll backtrack on Panjiva and say, what are they shipping? Where are these factories at? But I wouldn't necessarily I wouldn't necessarily take everything I have out of China and try to replicate it in another country. What I would look is for similar products in my category that are being made in another country, get that up and running and get established with a supplier, and then slowly transition to things that are going to be made. My personal belief is that is the fastest way to establish into another country. Don't try to have them recreate what you're already doing. Find out what they do well that fits your category, buy it, establish a relationship, and then again, slowly trickle your stuff into them as time goes on. You're going to balance it out. You're going to hedge your bets, and you'll have way more chances of being successful quickly than you will trying to have them, like, I'm going to move my jeans over there. Like, if they're already making jeans, like, get their jeans first and then have them do yours. If that makes sense. Did I?
Yeah, so you'd essentially say you should launch probably what would be considered a new product for you that's familiar for them, that's easy for them to make, so that you can get the relationship started. And while that's happening in the back, like kind of on the back side of things, you're working on the back end, you're working on getting your products moved over there, but not until you've established that they can make the quality of the products that they're making with the new products that you're launching, essentially.
Right. So my philosophy is, as an e-commerce seller, your most valuable asset is your ability to market and sell a product, whether it's on an e-commerce platform or Amazon or whatever, right? I mean, I think that's what makes most sellers successful. So in saying that, if you can get a product that fits your category and you can get that thing up and running, the things that it does for you is that, you've diversified your manufacturing, you establish a relationship with a supplier, a buy-sell relationship with a supplier right off the bat. You're buying, you're building trust, and then it buys you time to take care of whatever obligation you have in China, still keeping that relationship, but being able to slowly move whatever it is that makes you successful, and you can add it in now instead of replacing. You can add it into your manufacturing in Vietnam if that's going well.
Yeah.
Or you can leave it in China, and that just kind of like it dwindles down while this other one builds up. So yes, launching a new product, from a different country, it would be the fastest way to go.
Okay. And I guess we started talking about this, and I don't think we finished it, but kind of going back on piggybacking off of what George had said as well. If you're getting into these trying to find manufacturers, trying to find a sourcing agent, trying to find a team in Vietnam or India or Thailand or wherever, when you're trying to find those manufacturers and build that team, where would you start? So both with finding like
I would start with me. I mean, I would start with me. But I can't do it for everybody, right? It's like that's why I don't like say it that way. So what I would do if I don't know anybody in Vietnam, I would obviously network out, and I would call you, Ben, and say, hey, Ben, do you have anybody in Vietnam or whatever? Like that's the first thing you do, right? You go to your network with everything and find out like who's doing stuff. And somebody could say like, hey, well, I have somebody up to me in Vietnam, and they help me do this and that, and say, hey, can I hire them to do some scouting for me? That's the first thing I would do. I would go to my network. If that doesn't work, then you could find somebody like me that does it. But at the end of the day, I would go and look up trading companies in Vietnam. I would look up trading companies in Vietnam. Why? Because trading companies know everybody. And if you can establish a relationship with a trading company right away and get something, your speed to market is that much faster. Now, do you pay a little more? All this other stuff? Yes. I don't believe trading companies are bad. I mean, I had one. I still work with them because it's easier for me to have them deal with some of these suppliers, especially when I buy little things like small quantity stuff. Like the trading companies are just like, it's great. I'd rather do that than have, my team working on certain things that just are not in their purview. I think tools like LinkedIn are fantastic. I mean, the first guy I hired out of Vietnam, I found him on LinkedIn back in 2011. So I think, I mean, I would find somebody that you can hire. I've told this story before, and I haven't done it in a while, but Fiverr is really good. So if you go to Fiverr or Upwork or whatever hiring platform that you want to use, gig platform, okay, you go to a gig platform and you basically say, Vietnam, I want just people in Vietnam that speak English or your native language. And you say, I need you to scout. You basically create a scouting gig. Like, I want you to scout all these suppliers for me. Okay. So you make a spreadsheet, you have all these suppliers scouted. And then, if it's a good list, you say, okay, then you create a contract or something to have them start, making first contact. I don't like to make first contact. Some people do. I prefer not to. I prefer to have somebody that I've already had an established relationship with connect. I like to have a local connection, make a local connection. When I do it as an American, I'm just another American that's, just trying to, push something or look at like, oh, what's under this rock? What's under that rock? So if I have a local person make the established connection, there's a little bit more credibility to it.
Yeah.
I mentioned the platform before, and I'm not promoting any of them. I don't get anything out of it because they're expensive, but I know there's some free ones. But if you have access to the U.S. Customs Border Patrol database through like Panjiva, I know there's some other ones like the Yeti one or whatever.
Import Yeti
or whatever. If you have access to that, I would use that to backtrack categorically. I mean, the probably easiest thing to do is categorically by country who's bringing them what. So if I was like, oh, I'm going to look up frames, wooden frames picture frames from Vietnam. Like that's what I would get I'd start looking up and sorting it by that country, and you could, get factory names and you go through. I mean, I would use AI to do that too, right? You have scouting out, some of these contacts or whatever, and then start reaching out.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Seemed like a long-winded, twisted answer, and if
no.
any clarification, you're more than welcome to contact me on that.
Yeah,
but
no,
I mean, it's all about, like everything else. It's more about just taking action, right? Like there's no one. I'm not the end all be all. I mean, I've had a lot of success, also made a lot of mistakes. I just know, like, when stuff happens, like, I try to think of 2 or 3 different ways, like, what can I do? I think the Fiverr way, I mean, if I were somebody right now that was desperate, I would go on Fiverr right now. I would look up, like, do a scouting gig, call it a research gig.
Yeah.
Create a research gig in Fiverr or Upwork, whatever. I would say I need to find cut and sewers in Vietnam right now, and then go.
Yeah. And I know you were one of the people who I talked to, and I know Steve Simonson, who you're friends with, has been talking about this for a while as well. But a couple of years ago, you told me start looking at manufacturing outside of China, like start trying to move away from China. And you've been giving me that advice. And I've taken it to a large extent, but I still have more to work through. But what's your advice for me and everybody else for 2 years from now? Obviously, we have no idea what's going to happen next. We're all kind of playing guessing games. But 2, 3, 5 years from now, where if you were a company, where would you want to be with your sourcing?
Personally, I would start looking at I would not stay in one category. I would look at what can I get from where, and what I mean by that is, like, I would look at the US and say, like, this, I bought a company last year that makes skincare products.
Yep.
And the reason why I did that is because, and you and I talked about it. I saw just some handwriting on the wall. I wanted to be able to control my own destiny. I wanted to be able to manufacture here in the United States. I wanted to be able to control, everything that I could, and not be subject to things like which were happening right now.
Absolutely.
I would look at, okay, what's in the Western Hemisphere right now that I can get? Like, is there stuff in Brazil that I can get? Is there stuff in South America that I can get, or whatever? Start looking regionally and say, like, where's stuff coming from, and say, where can I establish? Because the biggest point of doing that is you want to be able to flex. Like, when something like this happens, you can pivot from one thing and go to the other quickly because you're already established there. Start looking at other countries. I wouldn't necessarily just stay in Southeast Asia either. I mean, Vietnam and Thailand and stuff, they're all options. It is a really good option. My concern with India is because of where they are located. Like, from a maritime standpoint, logistically, I think it's probably the hardest place to get to from India to the United States, from a shipping lane point of view, right? Is there stuff in northwestern Africa or some stuff in Europe? Like, what are items that and it's going through the whole sell process that we all go through when we're selling. Like, you're looking for your product, you go through that whole thing and say, okay, well, where can I get this? So instead of just going right to China, you start expanding and saying, like, can I get this widget from somewhere else? Who else is making something like this? And start thinking 3 or 5 years ahead in order to balance out, because none of this stuff is ever going to go away. Like, it's all cyclical, right? Like, we're always going to have these. When you have peaks and valleys, when you have a real international global sourcing outlook, it's everything you're doing is you're trying to balance out all those peaks and valleys. So, like, if one thing takes a hit, you can then ramp up the other one, get that going to balance everything out.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I know we're starting to run out of time. George, do you have any questions you want to drop in?
No, I think this has been really, really insightful. And Patrick, you clearly do know what you're talking about. And as I've mentioned before, there have been a few people that I've recommended Patrick to, and they've raved about him. And there's a few people I respect who've mentioned a lot of good things about Patrick and his knowledge too. So if you do want to reach out to Patrick, and if he's got the capacity to kind of help you out, I'm sure he will. Patrick, what's the best way people could reach out to you?
So the best way to reach out for me is you can message me. I mean, I am on Facebook, LinkedIn, but by email, I always answer every email. So if somebody wants to do that, they're more than welcome to. And I can, I don't know if you want me to put my email in the chat, or I can write it down somewhere and send it to you. But those are the best ways.
Okay, yeah. Well, what we'll do is, for those who might be watching on YouTube, we'll put it in the description and something similar on the podcast too. Patrick, is there anything that Ben and I didn't mention today that you think is really important that we should have talked about?
I'm looking at my notes here. Yeah, I want to emphasize again that what's happening right now, I know it's painful, but stuff like this has happened before. I mean, when we had COVID, people remember when container rates went from like $3,000 or $4,000 to $22,000 a container, right? Like we all had to make adjustments. We all had to be creative. When the first tariffs came along, we all had to make adjustments. We all had to be creative. Like I can't emphasize enough that staying calm and like making calculated decisions, even quickly, without losing your head, is the best way to go. I know people are really feeling the pain right now, and I am too. I mean, I was telling Ben earlier before this, I have a deal with a large retailer that I've been working on that is now full stop, just because of what's happening. So it's having that mental fortitude of saying, okay, this is where we're at realistically. And do it like a realistic self-assessment of like, what are your numbers? Like, what are your dates? And then moving on from there, I get it. People want to complain, and I don't blame anybody for it, but really keep your head and keep moving forward. There's a lot of opportunity out there still. As bad as it may seem, there is a lot of opportunity out there right now, and it's just are you aware enough to see those opportunities?
Brilliant, amazing.
Awesome.
Well, thank you
very much.
And Ben, thank you so much.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
Okay, great, and thank you everyone for listening. Those listening. Send stream.